I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Thursday, March 16th, 2023, and we've got a great program for you today. You know, what's on everybody's mind and should be on everybody's mind is the condition of the economy, the financial condition of the country, particularly behind the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and another institution. We're going to talk about that. Most importantly, we're going to talk about what it means to Black people, our people. Should we be paying attention to it? Let's have that discussion. You're not hearing it in the mainstream press. I think it's our duty to make sure that we interpret our interest in this conversation as well. Also today, we've got a great segment as we have recently with book authors. We're talking with the editor of our books section of Inside News, and joining us to discuss his new book is Dr. Willie Dean, whose book is called Overcoming: How Faith, Family, and Friends Helped One Black Man Beat the Odds. That'll be later in the program today. Let me begin by going right into the first part of the program. I want to introduce both Kim Crayton, who is an anti-racist economist. We'll have her explain what that means, and introduce Dr. Duncan Pelly, PhD. He's the Cal Turner Endowed Chair of Business Administration at Fisk University. And I'll bring into this conversation momentarily a third person who's on the ground here in Minneapolis. Anthony Taylor is with the Wellness Center. We'll talk about the impact as we try to personalize what this news means in the economy. Well, first of all, let me ask Duncan Pelly. Dr. Duncan, welcome to the program. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's do a 101 because, you know, we're all getting inundated about SVB and the following bank closure. Describe what's happening, first of all, and what it means to the country in general, setting up our ability to discuss what it means to Black America and people that don't see themselves in the millionaire bracket who seem to be, you know, the focus of this crisis right now.
Yes, this is a really good question, and kind of give you a broad overview of what happened at both of these banks. I think it is a tribute to banks that over specialize in their clientele and the kinds of investments they make. I mean, we're looking at, especially with Silicon Valley Bank, something that is really, really focused on the venture capital sector and the tech sector. However, if you look at the overall banking industry, I think it was the 16th largest bank here in the United States. It's not a very, very large bank, actually, in terms of market cap, in terms of deposits. I always laugh. I say, much like the Silicon Valley experience is so far removed from that of the average entrepreneur, it might as well be fiction. By the same token, these banks that are collapsing cater to a very, very specialized clientele. And so for mainstream America, including Black Americans, this is not something that I would be particularly concerned about. It catered to a very, very niche market. Yes, we're seeing a little bit of a hiccup in the overall stock market, a little bit of panic going, but I think this is going to recover very, very quickly.
Well, let me bring in our other guest here, who is talking about anti-racist economy. What's your take on this, Kim Crayton? And unmute, please. Here we
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you.
I agree with Dr. Pelly at some juncture, but not completely. Because the reason I am an anti-racist economist, I have been in the tech space for a while, since 2014. I have been, was recently in a doctoral program for business administration. I've been working with these tech companies for 7 years about systems, institutions, and policies designed to privilege the few at the expense of the many. So although it was a niche bank, its impact means something. Now, The average Black person does not have 250K in their account.
Right.
Most of us, as we know, we saw during the pandemic, we very seldom have $300 to $500 in case of emergency. So in that respect, it doesn't impact us. But I see SVB as different because it was led by tech folks and not regular Wall Street folks or regular, medium or small banking people. There's a whole different ethos that impacts us. So one of the things when I saw what was coming out, I was asking, particularly when they start talking about DE and I, how many of the depositors were non-white, and particularly how many people investing in this company as well as in leadership were non-white. Because when you're talking about, when you want to malign DEI, that's just the boogeyman of the day. Having an organization that is overwhelmingly white is not diversity. And I'm trying. So I'm a systems thinker. So I don't want it to be just the SVB, because it's not just that. It is a ethos within our community in tech that is problematic. It is systems, institutions, and policies globally that are designed to privilege the few at the expense of the many. And that is why I call myself an anti-racist economist. I don't want to be against white supremacy and anti-Blackness. I want to build a future that is supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free. And nothing about what I've heard about this bank is any of those things.
Let me give some more background on the bank. I'm looking at a story that is posted on our website, insightnews.com. It's from Ventura Tennicon, assistant professor of economics at Indiana University. We posted this on March 14th, I believe, and the story's updated the same day. And the headline is "Why SVB and Signature Bank Failed So Fast." And the U.S. banking crisis isn't over yet. That's statement number one. The article, I'll read 3 paragraphs here, says that Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failed with enormous speed so quickly that they could be textbook cases of classic bank runs in which too many depositors withdraw their funds from a bank at the same time. The failures at SVP and Signature were 2 of the 3 biggest in U.S. banking history, following the collapse of Washington Mutual in 2008. So the article says, how could this happen when the banking industry has been sitting on record levels of excess reserves, or the amount of cash held beyond what regulators require? While the most common type of risk faced by a commercial bank is a jump in loan defaults, known as a credit risk, that's not what's happening here. And the last note here, he says, as an economist who has expertise in banking, I believe it boils down to 2 other big risks every lender faces: interest rate risk and liquidity risk. So let's go and speak to those, Dr. Pelly. Liquidity and interest rate risks. What does that mean?
So you kind of have a perfect storm that's occurred here when we talk about interest rate and liquidity. So as you're having the Fed raising interest rates, that means a couple of things. One, it means that you're going to have fewer people taking out loans, which of course hurts a bank's bottom line. But also, and especially with SVB, you had a time during COVID where we had low interest rates, and combine that, and this is where the liquidity is coming in, combine that with the fact that the tech sector did really, really well. So they took their excess funds, they deposited them in SVB. Now, SVB, benefiting from relatively loose capital restrictions, starts investing the money that they have in their bank in low interest bonds. So now combine this, and this is where the interest risk comes in. Now combine this with the fact that the Fed is raising interest rates that devalues the bonds or the bond funds that they've invested in. And so it also winds up kind of, as people are starting to make runs on the banks, you have the fact that they start selling bonds and taking a huge loss. That starts kind of a large panic. You combine that also, and this is where the liquidity comes in, with the fact that a lot of your Silicon Valley types are starting to have to pay back their loans with cash. Hence, they're having to make withdrawals from their SVB accounts to pay off these different loans. And then, of course, that kind of escalated into a larger panic. So you've got interest rates that are changing. You've got impacts on the bond market, and then also impacts on loans to their clients, specifically those that are in the tech industry. It was a bank that grew, in my opinion, way too fast during the COVID years because of the fact that the tech sector was booming. The last statistic I looked at, their deposits grew by, I think, threefold between 2019 and 2022. It was so fast, and they got used to that model. And then suddenly we have these rapid changes. And again, because of that lack of diversity of clients, lack of diversity of an investment, they were not well equipped to handle the storm. This is impacting a lot of banks, but it impacts some banks harder than others because of their choice of clientele.
But you were saying early on, Dr. Pelly, that might have a direct, significant, immediate impact on the Black community or ordinary, ordinary people. None of us, most of us don't have $250,000 in deposits in banks. Talk more about that. Why you say that? And I want to push back on it a little bit and explore what are the connections? What impact does a challenge at the national macro level deliver to ordinary people who are basically unaware of the mechanics of money and of economies, but they certainly bear the brunt because either they have more or less money, less jobs, their money buys them less, and they suffer more when economies collapse. What do you think?
I'm not even sure that these two bank collapses are significant enough to impact the macro level. I don't think that they're large enough in terms of market cap or deposits to cause that. And I do have to applaud the federal government for stepping in and guaranteeing the deposits even beyond the FDIC limit, so that individuals that were having deposits there will still be able to take out their money. I think the people that you're going to find that are hardest hit by these two bank collapses are the investors in those banks, as well as the employees of those banks, and then possibly some of the depositors of those banks. But it's a very small group of people. And I would argue that the majority of Americans, including Black Americans, probably didn't have stock in SVB,
Right.
probably weren't even operating in that space. Most Americans, I would argue, are utilizing some of the larger banking chains, which right now have been impacted a little bit. But the last time I checked, just before I came on the show, I was looking at the stock tickers, and it looks like there's a little bit of a recovery action going on right now. Or you may have people operating out of their community banks, which again is going to be relatively isolated from these particular pressures. These are decisions that were unfortunate, especially with SVB heavily investing in tech and biosciences, not having a diversity of clients. And even in the best case scenario, the way venture capital works, you're going to have 80 clients potentially in a sample. One's going to be the next home run, the next Facebook or something like that. You'll have 5 or 6 of the Walking Dead. Yeah, they make a profit, but it's not that exciting. And then the rest all go belly up. I mean, that's kind of the way that model works. It's very different than, it's an uncertainty-based model, which is different from corporate finance, which is more risk-oriented. So by definition, you're almost gambling with the way SVB operated. So you take some bad bets and then a few other larger macroeconomic pressures. They just weren't making the right decisions to be equipped to handle the storm. I don't think it's representative of the banking industry as a whole right now, though.
So the worst that could happen did happen. The perfect storm happened, and there was potentially a run of the bank. The bank was forced to liquidate or sell bonds at a great loss. And to everybody's surprise, maybe not to everybody's, but the Fed stepped in quickly to guarantee the deposits, and that's beyond the standard, $250,000 FDIC insurance that everybody's familiar with. I think people are familiar with it. They don't think about it. And it doesn't mean anything. It's kind of what banks do until something like this happens. And when you've got a concentrated investment group or banking or depositor group who all have many, many, many more thousands of dollars invested in a single institution, and they find their money at risk. What I heard over the weekend before the president announced that the government would assure that everyone could get their deposits out if they wanted to as early as Monday, was that the network of rich people activated their networks and created a panic that really moved the government to take this thing even more seriously, or as seriously as it did. Not doing that, from what I'm reading and hearing in the news, could have meant contagion and other people examining the safety of their deposits in other institutions. I mean, like, one of the things in today's news is a Swiss bank, right? Same set of problems, different reasons maybe, and maybe you'll talk about that, but the potential for something happening, and contagion was the word, the panic that people might experience and cause them to act in ways that are irrational, further damaging the economy. That's a real threat. And I think you're right. The president and the government acted quickly to try to ensure and tamp down the idea of panic in the economy and in banking. But part of it was at the emergence and the statement of interest of those rich people who had their money in the bank, and they shook the tree. They shook it hard, and the government felt it had to respond. They probably did the right thing. What do you, Kim, what do you think? Am I saying this the right way? Does that make sense to you?
Let me in this conversation.
Go ahead.
Please let me in this conversation. Because I've been taking notes. There's some problems, things that people aren't talking about. First of all, the bank run was, and this is why I love Twitter. You saw people, they were in small groups on Slack advising each other. This is about to happen. So your average depositor had no idea this was going on. So all of these people, there was somebody who actually said that they were pulling their money out and they thought they were going to be slick and buy extra stock in the bank because it was cheaper. So not only was he getting his money out, but he was also trying to profit from it. And so this is where, again, I say systems, institutions, and policies. So many folks in this space are these libertarians. They don't want any regulation. They just want to do all. We saw it in crypto. We saw it in blockchain. They just want to just do willy-nilly. But as soon as their money, as soon as their privilege is impacted or threatened, they're screaming and hollering. And that's what I saw on Twitter. Folks saying, that's who started the contagion narrative. That's who started they need to bail us out, or that was rich white men protecting their privilege and their power at the expense of everybody else. Period. You cannot. And so that is why when Dr. Pelly says this was different, and it was because that was different. You have very powerful people, billionaires, who were not only shaking the tree, they were threatening to cut the trees down if they didn't get their way. And also what people need to understand, because this is a VC bank, so many of these depositors didn't have a choice to be depositors in this bank. To get this VC money, they had to deposit their money into this bank. So a lot of people didn't have to get the money, they had to play the game. So there's a lot of narratives going on that people aren't talking about. I don't hear on the news, but if you go on Twitter, you see people. There was one woman from Ohio who thought it was a good idea, a white woman, thought it was a good idea to tell this story about how it impacted her, and that she had 4 kids, and over the years, her husband, and they decided that she had 18 months of savings. Black people don't have 18 months of savings for one of the partners to go off and do a business. And she was saying that he was in manufacturing. Well, the Twitter CIA went and found out. She made it seem like he was blue collar on the line. No, he's a manager in some manufacturing company. Both of them went to McKinsey or something. Both of them went to Ivy League schools. They were in the top tax brackets. So this is what we're seeing is the most privileged getting to position themselves as victims in situations that they created. And then it's expected that we all should care about it. And they made it because to make us all care about it.
Let me bring 2 more voices in because I want to see what is happening on the ground in the community. And I've got 2 colleagues, regular friends of mine here. Anthony Taylor and Jonathan Palmer. Anthony Taylor, I said earlier, is with the Wellness Center in Minneapolis, but he's also doing some business development projects in North Minneapolis. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about a major job-creating technology business owned by a Black man being sited in the middle of North Minneapolis's Black community. We'll do that in a couple of weeks, I think, Anthony. Also with me is Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is a Morehouse man. I say that because Jonathan, everybody else on here today is from Fisk. So I told him not holding it against them, but a lot of Fisk people on this call today, and that's a cool thing. Jonathan is the head of Hallie Q Brown Community Center. It's one of the foundational legacy institutions, a settlement house-based organization that serves ordinary people every day and has been doing so for almost 100 years. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. But Jonathan, Anthony, welcome. First, your gut impressions. What does it mean for us at the ground level? Is this a conversation that we kind of look at like we used to look at the stock market pages in the newspaper? We see it, foreign language, doesn't mean us. Keep on reading. Go to the comics page or the obituaries, right? And do our regular thing. Or is something going on here that we should know about? And do we know about it? And ought we know about it? Anthony, you first.
Hi, everybody. I think, in terms of the Black community, what's interesting is I feel like that this hits us on both ends of the spectrum. SVB, what was interesting, they were major supporters of the VC ecosystem. That they actually in 2022, what was interesting, they funded a State of Black Venture Capital venture report that they along with some Black accelerators. And most recently, because of the failure that Rain Ventures had to cancel their Black founder ecosystem building thing at South by Southwest. And I know this is, rare air around VC money, but Black VC money is really an important part of what's happening right now, because this is really the first time we've been in the game. And even then, Black VC captured like 260 million of $336 billion, some crazy numbers. So I think there's something around that where we're gaining confidence in Black VC and Black entrepreneurship. And Black entrepreneurship is a place where the community and our leaders are putting major energy around potentially long-term wealth building strategies for Black entrepreneurs and Black communities. And so there's a concern there, and as I see it. The other thing that we're seeing on the ground level, the work that we're doing at the Cultural Wellness Center in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, in North Minneapolis, is that the Black community already has a lack of trust with our traditional financial systems. And there are lots of elements to this. And the problem is that this news comes out and what they hear is bank run. They hear those things. They also get further proof that, again, the system doesn't work for them. So I worry that we have to develop a narrative that balances those things out and actually keeps us in the game relative to how we're going to be working to change systems. I really appreciate you, sister, around anti-racist economists and the economy and that idea, because we've got to reshape systems to work more accurately and more in a real way to connect to our communities so that we can actually build wealth at the grassroots level in the community. And so they're taking snippets of this story and again validating a lived experience that we have, which we should be disconnected from banks. And we've got to, and we're in a moment where that is really dangerous for us as well.
Jonathan Palmer, impressions, thoughts, feelings, questions. You have questions for Dr. Pelly or Kim?
Well, before I get to that, first I'll say, hey, Fisk is an awesome school, and there's just nothing but HBCU love. So we have that. There's another piece to this, which is the one that I really find fascinating, which is what they're saying is the reason for this collapse, and what is being blamed by conservatives as a way to distract from the fact that it is the rich white men who are taking their money out and causing all this, is that they're saying that the collapse was due to diversity initiatives and woke initiatives. They've gone so far as to report that Fox News, Tucker Carlson reported $73 million went to Black Lives Matter and similar organizations. Now, there's no evidence of that, but this is the way to distract of saying that the diversity initiatives, the diversity hire, that the bank was too focused on that and not on managing the bank. And that's why it collapsed, so that the right can get angry. They can utilize this to fundraise more. They can utilize this to go ahead and distract from the fact that at the end of the day, what we have, a group of rich, primarily white men, going ahead and moving their money around, as was said earlier, that they went ahead and let each other know. They went ahead and caused this whole collapse because they were not only letting each other know they were going to do this, but they were working out ways to make more money of it. So there's an issue here where racism, again, shows its face. People talk about they don't understand where systemic racism is and what it is, but it's there. It's at the core of every negative thing we have. And that's a big piece we have to contend with. And I really appreciate Kim pointing out that piece about Twitter and the fact that they were all connecting on this. This didn't just happen and fall out the blue. And the impact that it can have on the ground is the people who have nothing to do with this, who aren't the investors, who aren't going ahead and shifting things around. They're the ones that that get caught in the crossfire and the games that get played.
That reminds me, Jonathan, I'm trying to think of the right term, but in social media and Twitter in particular, they used to have those instant parties or crowd something. What was the word for that?
Pop-ups.
The phrase? Pop-ups.
Or the flash mobs.
Flash mob. So this is almost like a flash mob activity among a very elite and privileged and informed and connected group of people around their money. So it's like them doing in the financial sector what street people might do to upset a department store, in a neighborhood. Kim Crayton, sit in that for a minute. Talk more about that. And I wonder about the international implications. I mentioned.
First of all,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
What you're speaking about is information asymmetry, which is why we are always at the end of it. If you're not able to leverage the systems, institutions, and policies, and I keep saying it over and over again because this is systems, institutions, and policies. I do not, as I've looked around the world, I very seldom see systems, institutions, and policies that are not rooted in white supremacy and anti-Blackness. It is global. People are profiting off anti-Blackness globally. People are proposing white supremacy, new bills every day. We see it. And so what we lack is information asymmetry because Black communities are always seen as consumers and not producers. And we have to get more, and we have to become more producer oriented. When I sit in conversations with people talking about generational wealth, I'm that person that's going to bust your bubble and let you know that little $20 you doing every day, putting it in it, that is not how we going to get generational wealth. We need to be building businesses. We need to be building businesses that hire other people. Because again, every system, institution, and policy is designed to privilege the few at the expense of the many. How these folks get to where they build businesses. They tap their networks. When people talk about friends and family, Black folks don't have no friends and family we can get no money from. But our friends and family, we pass that same $100 around every month. And so until we can get to a place where we can build businesses that we can leverage for other opportunities, and that's what they have been able to do. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, I think his name is David, whatever his name is. They all came from PayPal. These same people stay connected and they just keep building and getting, again, information asymmetry. They get in these spaces. And the reason that DE&I is such a threat to them is because when you get someone in the room who is not a cisgendered, Christian, married, man, what you get is somebody asking other questions. So I always fight back when they say, "Oh, I'm going to be a political, we're a political organization." We saw that with Basecamp. We saw that with crypto. I can't even think of Brian Armstrong is the CEO. It's easy to say you're apolitical when everybody there has the same politics you do. You don't have to discuss it. I am political just by my very existence. There's nothing about my life that is apolitical. And you can go kick rocks because that is what it is. So when you talk about apolitical, that tells me that you're riding on easy street. And I tell them every day, you are leveraging unearned privileges because you didn't earn anything. You didn't do it. You're not my peer because you don't know how to be resilient. You don't know any of those. You don't have the things that it takes. And so you appropriate. Whiteness appropriates everything. Black culture is the culture. They appropriate it and sell it back to us as consumers and not producers.
Dr. Pelly, what do you think?
I would like to agree with Kim. It's especially with the whole Silicon Valley thing. What we have, a similar term that she's using is we look at institutional signposts in entrepreneurship. And the dominant narrative is that in order to be an entrepreneur, you do need to be white, male, Silicon Valley located, and tech oriented. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the truth is more like it is those kinds of narratives are so far removed from the experience of the average entrepreneur that it might as well be fiction. Mm-hmm. The real bulwarks of the American economy are not the Mark Zuckerbergs, they're not the Bill Gates. It is the mom and pop location operating somewhere in the South or in the Midwest in a rural location, these micro enterprises. This is where the really cool ideas come from. These are the pillars of the community, and these are the people that are actually hiring other members of their communities and therefore creating wealth for everybody, including themselves. And I think it's too bad that we focus all the time on this venture capital model because, yeah, it looks cool and it's a nice dream. But I'll tell you, the number of times I have done entrepreneurship workshops, consulting, you'd be amazed how many people will say, you know what I was told by this, entrepreneurship consultant. They told me that I can never be an entrepreneur because I'm not doing something in tech. They told me that I'm not an entrepreneur because I'm managing my family's dry cleaning. They told me that opening a pizza parlor is a waste of time. It's not all about, one, the economic development piece is there, but also remember that there's a lot of people that go into entrepreneurship. It's the great equalizer, right? There are people that are not hireable for a variety of reasons. Maybe there's age discrimination, maybe because of their membership of one ethnic group or another, or maybe they have a physical disability, or maybe they have children at home and the regular work schedule doesn't work for them. This is an opportunity for them to help themselves and also contribute to society. And I think that sometimes we focus on these bad things going on SVB, or we focus on all the negative things that were happening at Uber, Facebook, etc. But we do that at the cost of not celebrating the successes of Joe down the street with his small hamburger joint. That's what we should really be embracing. That is what entrepreneurship is, not this kind of other thing going on here on the side. I hope that makes sense.
Kim, your comment?
My comment is this is why Black women are the largest growing group of entrepreneurs. We've had it, particularly during the pandemic when everything went to, we saw for the first time remote work for us. And we saw the data. So I don't use the word microaggressions. There's nothing microaggression about this. It's professional violence. I call it what it is. It's professional violence. The stuff that Black women have to deal with on an everyday basis. I tell people, I need y'all to think about how long it takes a Black woman to write an email to a white person. It takes us forever because we gotta think about how you're gonna respond, what we need to say, all these things that take up energy, labor, and stress and anxiety. This is why Black women are the largest group of entrepreneurs right now, and we're so innovative because I always tell people in any community, find the most vulnerable in the community, They're the ones who've been dealing with the impact of our decisions, and they've come up with solutions. That is why DE&I matters. It's not about having two blacks and then somebody who has autism, or somebody missing a leg. It's not about quotas. It is about in the 21st century, with a knowledge economy, you are hiring knowledge workers. And knowledge workers with lived experience of solving problems are what you're hiring for. So that is fundamentally what Black and brown people do. We solve problems that white supremacy and anti-Blackness has created. And that is why we every research that is not rooted in proving white supremacy will show you that if you go to the most vulnerable in any community, just like right now, we're seeing all these trans legislations. Trans people have the answers to how to solve this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me ask Dr. Pelly, switching a little bit, what would have happened if the president and the government said, you know what, investment means risk. We've got $250,000 of your deposit insured. You can get that. But after that, you're on your own. What if there was not a federal response? Lay out a couple of scenarios of where we'd be, what could have happened, what still may happen, but what would have happened if for sure on Monday, nobody could get their money more than $250,000?
In terms of the overall economy, you would have seen a lot of panic in the stock market. Of that, I'm certain. You would have seen markets absolutely tumble, and that wouldn't be just the banking sector. I think you would see that overall. And I think
before you continue, and is there a group, a risk taking betting group that would even predict and attempt to cause that as another way to make money by janking the whole system? Is that too cynical a view from a journalist here?
Well, I unfortunately have a somewhat pessimistic view of humanity. So you found a kindred spirit with me. But I mean, this is how bubbles are created, right? I mean, it's the gossip, the insider stuff. And yeah, there's always people that will sell right at that moment, and then, you know, they buy up again during a dip. I mean, I absolutely think that I think that would happen. And this would cause a panic. But I think it would be a panic that is based almost on superficial reasons versus true structural problems. Mm-hmm. So yes, we would have seen a dip. And I think the people that you would have seen hurt more, interestingly enough, again, most people don't have $250,000 just in a deposit. And think about why. Even very wealthy people don't. They probably, if they have more than $250,000, they're probably saving it for like another investment, like a stock purchase, or, you know, a house, or something a little more expensive. Just having that kind of cash lying around is a somewhat uncommon circumstance for both, you know, very wealthy and also but for very poor people too. It doesn't make sense, especially in this inflationary environment, to just have money metaphorically under the mattress in a bank. So very, very few people will have that. But there is a group that I think would be disproportionately harmed had that been the scenario, and that would have been retirees. Retirees who have their 401ks, you know, maybe locked up in stocks. And, you know, a lot of these retirement accounts have these rules regarding withdrawals. And I think that is the group that would have been hurt the most. And I would probably add to that, it would have been the poor who have a retirement account. And then the middle class would have probably been hurt right after that. I think that would have been the group that got hit the hardest. But for the most part, again, people struggling, you know, every day to make ends meet. Yes, they might, if they had some stocks. You know, if they're playing in the stock market, I think they would have probably panicked and been hurt. But and the regional banks probably would have been panicking also. But I think it would have been quite superficial.
Kim, how do we learn? How do we teach Tim Crayton? How do we teach our people to, number one, invest in learning, acquiring the knowledge, becoming familiar with, and being able to have dinner conversations about the economy of the planet and our role in it?
I wrote the book, and I've also come up with a thing that I call hoodnomics, and it's taking economics to the hood. It is, I need it out of the white ivory towers of Wall Street and Silicon Valley. I want the person working at Popeyes. I want the person who cleans my car. I want everybody talking about the economy, because do we actually have a democracy if you have no way to leverage the economy in your benefit? And this is what I tell people. I've never experienced a democracy. I am a Black woman living in the United States. I have never experienced a democracy. We need to be honest about these conversations, and we need to stop placating and just straight no chaser. Just rip the Band-Aid off and have some honest conversations. I want everybody talking about the economy at their level. I need to meet them where they are, because we talk about it as if only the Warren Buffetts, only they have, they're smarter. No. I don't want them making decisions for me anymore. I see what the impact of their decisions on the economy has done to us. We need people with the lived experience of solving problems talking about the economy. And I wrote the book. That's why I wrote the book.
The book is?
Profit Without Oppression, a blueprint for building an anti-racist organization. And in the very first part of that book, it is know thyself. It is asking you questions so you can start being honest about what you see. Because one of the problems is we keep saying, oh, it's broken. No, it's not broken. It's working as designed. And so if we keep talking about it's broken, we're using resources the wrong way. If we go at it, oh, this is how it's designed, then we can come up with a different strategy.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you said in your first remarks, Sister Kim, was that you described these guys as shaking the tree. Maybe I said that, and you said shaking the tree, and you said, but also willing to chop the tree down.
Yes, and that's what we need to address.
That's a frightening idea. Talk about what do you mean by that? Let me see why I brought it up. Yeah, I was with my heart doctor this morning, and we're talking about not my heart, but the banking crisis, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so everybody's talking about it, and what the conclusion of our conversation is. My physician's a Black doctor, a young Black man. Said, well, white guys that are willing to blow the whole thing up,
burn it down,
if they don't get their way. And that your comment reminded me of that. So talk about that for a minute. What does it mean? Is that just a fear, or is that?
We need to be honest. Again, having honest conversations. There are elements in our communities who want to burn it down. They have no affinity to community. They have no affinity to solidarity. Their whole Steve Bannon talks about the fourth turning. It's this philosophy that there are people here who are here to destroy, and there are people here to build. He says he's here to destroy. For me, what they don't understand is I cannot build on what they destroy, so they're destroying themselves in the process, and they're okay with that. Jonathan, I can't think of his last name, but he wrote a book called Dying of Whiteness. When you ask rural, poor white folks, if they could get insurance, but Black people also got insurance, they said they would not want insurance. These are the things that we need to wrestle with. There are people who will die in maintenance of white supremacy. And until we have those conversations, we're not having the right conversations. When you're talking about somebody's willing to chop the tree down, why are you telling me to build Jonathan Merritt's? Why are you telling me to build a tree house in it? They're trying to chop the tree down.
Integrating into a burning house. Schumpeter described creative destruction. What does that mean, Duncan Pelly?
So, Schumpeter talks about Okay, yeah, the Schumpeter in a minute or less. He describes creative destruction all the way back in the 1930s. You've got your pre-existing supply and demand curve like so, and the entrepreneur visualizes a totally different reality and destroys the one that exists and builds one based upon his way of seeing the world. But the thing is, and we talk about these conversations, I actually have to thank all of you, because the fact that we're talking about it now, it won't solve all the world's problems in 1 hour, but it's a step in the right direction, and that should be applauded.
Well, listen, let me thank all of you, Brother Jonathan Palmer, Brother Anthony Taylor. Anthony, we'll be back pretty soon talking about your business venture in North Minneapolis. Thank you, author Kim Crayton, the anti-racist economist and author. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Duncan Pelly. Thank you for being here. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Boy, what a great conversation, but what an important issue. I really, really want to stand to the idea that we need to have this conversation at the water cooler, over the breakfast or dinner table. This has to be where we talk about, what the world is and our role in it, our analysis of it. And we have the capacity, we have an obligation, a duty to create a future, to shape a future, to feel like we have the capability of co-authoring a future in which our presence is acknowledged, is celebrated, and valued, because what we bring to this future is this notion of being solutions, of being the solution, not being the problem. Well, let me go in and bring in the last segment of the program today. W.D. Foster Graham is here, and also joining W.D. and I, the author that I mentioned earlier, a former Minneapolis leader and public intellectual, Dr. Willie, let's here. Dr. Willie Dean. I'm sorry, I'm hesitating on that, Dr. Dean. Dr. Dean and I go back because he also served as the general manager of KFAI, which is one of our partner institutions. And Dr. Dean is also the partner of one of the giants of education here in Minneapolis and also in Memphis, Tennessee. Brother Willie Dean, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Al. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And WD, let me have you start the program and talk about why you suggested and invited Dr. Dean on. We're on the same page, so it was, yes, we got to do it. Let's make it happen. But talk about it from the book's editor point of view.
Well, as a book editor, I always believe in supporting Black authors and poets. And Brother Willie and I were also members of St. Peter's AME at the same time. And I've seen this character, I've seen his strength, I've seen his leadership. So when I read his book, I thought, hey, we need more stories like this, because too many times in the media, the position of Black men has portrayed in a negative fashion, like we're down and out, we're not going to make it, the way we treat our spouses, things like that. And I was definitely moved with the honesty in his memoir, because he has had such a distinguished career, but he can also acknowledge that as Black men, we also pay a certain price for that as well. But I seriously, when I read it, I read that in about 3 hours. So I am just so happy to have him on our show and talk about overcoming. And what touched me the most was his theme was always faith, family, and friends.
Well, the name of the book is Overcoming: How Faith, Family, and Friends Helped One Black Man Beat the Odds. Dr. Dean, tell us, how did faith, family, and friends help you beat the odds?
Well, this book was a labor of love. It was an opportunity for me to share my life story, initially thinking about a legacy for my 3 adult sons and the challenges that they faced in this world. And then I realized that perhaps it could be a springboard to talk about faith, family, and friends for the larger community, particularly young Black men. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I've lived in Texas, Missouri, Nebraska, there in Minneapolis, and also Cleveland, Ohio. So I've had snippets of the life experience over the last 70 years that I wanted to document. One of the things that I found out in my career with the YMCA, which spanned 35 years, moving from a program director position to a branch executive, later to being the first African-American CEO in a 123-year history of the Omaha, Nebraska YMCA, and later serving on the staff of the National Y, but that there were barriers that I faced. In fact, it led me to my doctoral dissertation to study barriers to upward mobility for African Americans in leisure services. And I did a case study of the YMCA. I did a randomized sample of 250 employees, 50 Black and 200 white, and found that invariably the white managers and executives were unaware of the barriers that people of color and women face in the organization. And I extrapolated that to the larger community also through a literature review. In fact, one of the respondents to my survey said, a white respondent from the Midwest, that he was driving with his Black friend and got pulled over several times by law enforcement and didn't really think much about it the first time or the second time. But beyond that, he began to ask his Black friend, I don't understand. And his friend said to him, you're driving with me while Black, living while Black. So this was something that many whites are unaccustomed to. So that's one of the challenges that I faced in my lifetime. Challenges also with regard to health, having been diagnosed with bilateral renal carcinoma, kidney cancer in both kidneys. And I think about how blessed I am to have worked for an organization that had health insurance, as many of our Black brothers and sisters do not. Had that not been the case, I might not be here. So I wanted to talk about challenges. My parents were sharecroppers. Dad shared with me many times that at the end of the harvest season, the white landowner would come back and say, Eddie, you almost made enough profit to pay off your loans. He could never get out of debt. And it was only serendipitously that he got on the back of a pickup in the early 1950s and drove to Memphis with friends, got a job as a truck driver, which became a game changer for our family. So employment, education, healthcare are all the things that I faced in my lifetime and that many other Black men and women face that I wanted to write about and tell the stories of how I was able to overcome with faith, with the grace of God, with family, a family that was focused. Even though mom and dad only had 5th and 8th grade education respectively, they believed in education. I became the second person in my family to earn a PhD. My sister has a master's degree. So it can happen. And then friends, how friends were supportive of me throughout my lifetime, being able to network, to have relationships that are long lasting. So I wanted this book, a memoir, to be a legacy to that.
WD, impressions, thoughts, feelings.
Well, I've always to say appreciated where he came from, because I know I come from the Midwest. I had not been exposed to that type of racism in the same way that Brother Willie Dean had. And I really appreciate when he shared so much about himself, and as his book to be an inspiration, I guess, especially for Black boys, Black men, that yes, you can do this. And it was important that you have that mentor. And he speaks in this book about Robert Terrell, was that mentor when he was growing up that basically encouraged him, yes, you can do it. Because, hey, at the end of the day, hey, we don't share these stories, who will? If we don't have that network of men and women sharing these kind of stories, those are behind us as Black boys and Black girls, they need these kind of role models, because there's too much negative stuff out there that can draw them away. Just like you talk about the school to prison pipeline. So it's up to us to contradict that, to counteract those messages that they receive. And Brother Willie Dean, and you did it so well.
Willie Dean, what does it mean to you to get feedback as you're around the country touring and presenting the book to audiences? What kind of feedback are you getting, number one? What did you expect to get, number two? And how do you describe the value of what WD just described, and that is the value of us telling our own story, how much of a game changer that is, and how we have to both teach and encourage more of us to do that, to value our thoughts, to value our own personal lived experiences and to feel that what we have done and are doing is worth documentation. It's worth, and that part of our way of living should be living a life that we document. No matter where we are, what level we're operating in, it's important. What do you think, Dr. Dean?
Well, I've been getting positive feedback as I've traveled physically and virtually on a book tour. We released the book November of last year in 2022, and we sold a significant number of copies. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've made book talks at Lamorne College here in Memphis, at my church, St. Andrew AME Church, where 150 congregants were a part of a celebration for Black History Month. And our pastor allowed me to give a talk about the book. A number of members said that they wanted to document this experience for their children. Mm-hmm. The former mayor of Minneapolis, Sharon Bell Selton, attended a workshop there at St. Peter's AME Church in December and bought several copies for her husband and her sons. And I'm finding that a number of readers are not buying it not only for themselves, but for others as gifts to document the Black experience. Let me tell you about an experience I had in Fort Worth back in the early 70s when I was with the YMCA. I was a branch executive. We gave team dances on the weekend. Sometimes 400 or 500 teens came to those dances, a way to keep them off the street. And so by 1:30 or so, when I got off, 1:30 a.m., I would often stop at a Jack in the Box restaurant to unwind, to get a burger and pop. I was sitting in the restaurant, which was an all-night restaurant, and someone came to the drive-thru who sounded to me like it was a Black customer. The white teenage boy who answered the call said, "That sounds like something an N-word would order." Almost immediately, he and his colleagues realized that I was sitting within earshot. Mm-hmm. I took my time, finished my meal, walked over to the counter, and beckoned to him with my finger. And I said, "The word is pronounced Negro." And he said nothing but, "Yes, sir." Now, I don't know what he said to his colleagues after I left or to the manager the next day. But at that moment, he gave a Black man respect. And you can imagine the fear and degradation that we have in our communities because this kind of thing happens and we may not even know about it. Or more blatantly, it happens and we do know about it. Mm-hmm. Now think about the murder of George Floyd there in the Twin Cities, mm-hmm. or Tyree Nichols here in Memphis recently at the hands of police. Research suggests that Black Americans are 3.23 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement than are white Americans. And that's really sad.
We got about 30 seconds. Final thought, wrapping up, invitation.
Well, I would encourage your viewers to order the book. It's available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Or if you want an autographed copy, you can contact me at area code 952-303-1268. Area code 952-303-1268.
So good to see you, my friend. Thank you for being here. And thank you, WD, for curating this program. We're going to keep doing this. Our mission, WD and I are on a mission to elevate and talk about, promote Black books. I'll see you next time.